everybody, Steve Dennis here from Fitness Flex Boot Camps and Personal Training. Just do this little video today to try and explain what insulin insensitivity is, or what it means to be carb intolerant, and why some obese people shouldn't be eating carbohydrates as much as lean and fit and young and healthy people. And just to explain what happens when we eat carbohydrates and what carbohydrates are. So I'll quickly go through it now with my amazing drawing that I've done here. It doesn't matter if you're eating potatoes or rice, pasta or bread or a Mars bar, these are all carbohydrates. Carbohydrates get eaten, go into your mouth, from your mouth they go into your guts. When you're in your guts, all carbohydrates will get broken down into glucose. Once it becomes glucose, it is small enough, very tiny, very, very small enough to go through the mesh or the membrane of the gut, and then it goes into your blood supply. And it's circulating in your blood as glucose, which can be used as energy. It is energy, glucose is energy. In a healthy, good, young person or muscly person or a non-obese person, somebody who's not done metabolic damage and eaten too much for 20, 30 years, somebody who's young, fit and healthy, this blood will now be in the glucose will be in the blood system, going around, and it will want to go into either muscle cells to be used as energy. If it can't get into there, it will go into fat cells to be stored as energy to be used later. So as the sugar is in, the glucose in your bloodstream, to get from your blood cells across the muscle cell membrane into the muscle cell, it's going to need something called insulin. Insulin is the transporter that takes it from your blood into your muscle cells, or from your blood into your fat cells. With insulin in your blood, these on the outside of these muscle cells and on the outside of the fat cells are called insulin receptors. So they will connect onto the insulin, and then insulin can transport glucose safely across into your muscle cells, where it can be used as energy or stored as glycogen, which is stored glucose energy in your muscles. Now the problems come when your muscles are full up with glucose or glycogen from your breakfast that you had, which had porridge and pasta or cereals, to make it a bad one, would be Cocoa Pops. You had that for breakfast, then you had a bottle of Coca-Cola or something like that for a snack. Then at lunchtime you're about to eat a sandwich with bread, and you can have some crisps, more carbohydrates and another can of Coke. Now this time the carbohydrates tries to get in, but the muscle cells are already full up from the Cocoa Pops. So they can't get into there, so they will just go into, insulin will help it go into fat cells, where it will be stored as triglycerides. It will be broken down into fat cells later on, hopefully, when you use it as energy. So fat cells get bigger. So if we keep eating, the problem that happens with insulin insensitivity, as a lot of people do, we spend a lot of time eating carbohydrates for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and snacking on carbohydrates and not doing enough exercise, not being a builder, not being an athlete. We are sat down at a desk, not burning off the glycogen that's stored in here. So over time, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30 years, over a long time of having too much carbohydrates and not doing enough exercise, the muscles start to shut down their insulin receptors. So we have less insulin receptors on the muscle cells, and we still have more on the fat cells. So as these are full up and the insulins that get sensitivity from the receptors are getting shut down in the muscles, then more and more glucose will be stored as fat in the fat cells. And as the fat cells grow, because we start getting obese and more fat, the more fat cells we have, the more insulin receptors that the fat cells have. And then the more carbohydrates you eat, the more that goes into your fat cells, and it's a vicious circle, a downward spiral. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You keep getting fatter, and your fat cells keep getting more and more insulin receptors. And because you're not using your energy in the muscles, they shut down their insulin receptors, and you end up with very little insulin receptors on your muscle cells, and that is insulin insensitivity. Your muscles are not sensitive to the insulin, so the insulin pushes the sugar into the fat cells. Remember, carbohydrates is glucose, is sugar. It goes into your fat cells, the fatter you get. The way to reverse that, to slow down the carbohydrates and do weight training and exercise then your muscles start getting pumped, they start growing more, their insulin receptors come back to life, you get more insulin receptors on your muscles, your fat cells start to disappear because you start using fat as energy instead of carbohydrates, you get less fat cells with less insulin receptors, and your muscles get bigger and more pumped with more insulin receptors. So that is what happens when you eat carbs. That's insulin insensitivity or carb intolerance, and that's how to cure it. Weight training, a lower carb diet. Thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed that. Bye bye.